It's a sunny spring day, the kind that feels like a fresh start. But that day, my heart felt heavy. The last couple of years have been a whirlwind, intense, exhausting, and transformative. As a DEI consultant, the work has been rewarding, but it has also been draining. I say DEI because it's easier for people to understand, but for me, it's more than a buzzword. It's about disrupting systems, fostering belonging, and creating spaces where people can thrive. Still, I can't ignore the heartbreak that comes with it. The heartbreak of being yet another statistic in the corporate cycle of DEI. It starts with eagerness from organizations to do what's right, but somewhere along the way, perspectives are weaponized, actions are misinterpreted, and the work becomes a battle against the very systems you're trying to dismantle. The next day, I decided to send out a positive farewell email because I wanted to appreciate everyone's progress and I needed clarity. I want to gather insights from those I've worked with, to understand how I've impacted them, or perhaps how I haven't. It's a step toward figuring out what's next for me in this journey. The email goes out to everyone I think may have engaged with me. As I hit send, I feel a mix of relief, unease, and uncertainty. An hour later, my eye starts twitching uncontrollably. It reminds me of an old Vietnamese superstition about eye twitches, that someone is thinking or talking about you. I laugh to myself, wondering if it's a sign that I've ruffled some feathers. I'm good at that, ruffling feathers. But I don't do it for the sake of disruption. I do it to spark curiosity, to ignite change. Still, I brace myself for what's to come. The responses start trickling in. Among the gratitude and kind words, there it is, a negative response. My heart sinks. I go straight to that familiar place of self-doubt, questioning my value, my abilities, my worth. Am I good enough? The words echo in my mind, louder than they should. But as the hours pass and my synapses fire, I remind myself to stay curious. I sit with my thoughts and feelings, examining them like an old sweatshirt that no longer fits. And that's when it hits me. Likability. The next morning, I wake up and catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My curls are wild, full, and unapologetic. They've taken on a life of their own, springing in every direction. And for some reason, they make me smile and give me a little bit of joyful energy. There's something about the way they bounce that gives me a little bounce back in my mindset. It's a reminder that even when things feel chaotic, there's beauty and resilience in the mess. My curls feel like a metaphor for my journey. Imperfect, untamed, but undeniably full of life. It encourages me to sit down and write. As I reflect on where I've been and where I'm going, I think about the work itself. The intensity of the past few years has left me questioning what success even means in this field. Is it about fewer incidents or better metrics? Or is it about creating environments where it's safe to fail, where learning is a journey instead of a destination? I want to hold on to the small victories, the moments when I've seen real change, even if it felt slow. I want to build sustainability into my work, not just for the organizations I serve, but for myself. I think about the feathers I've ruffled, the systems I've challenged, and the people I've connected with along the way, and I ask myself, what's next? How do I continue this work in a way that stays true to my values, even if it doesn't always make me likable? How do I embrace the discomfort of growth while holding space for joy and resilience? Likability is often defined as the quality that makes someone pleasant to be around. In the workplace, it's the ability to build rapport, foster trust, and create positive interactions. It can look like being approachable, empathetic, and consistent in your actions. But here's the reality. Likability is subjective. It's shaped by oppressive social constructs, biases, and societal norms about who is worthy of being liked. And when likability becomes a filter for how we treat others, or how we measure our own success, it doesn't just impact individuals, it reinforces systemic inequities and upholds oppressive systems. How does likability play into systemic oppression? Systems of oppression like racism, sexism, and other forms of discrimination are upheld by norms that determine who is seen as acceptable or deserving. Likability is often weaponized within these systems, bias in who is deemed likable. Oppressive social constructs often dictate who is perceived as approachable or relatable. Traits like assertiveness, passion, or even accents may be praised in some groups while penalized in others, reflecting deeply rooted inequities rather than objective standards. Punishing those who challenge the system. Individuals who speak out against inequities or challenge the status quo are often labeled as difficult or unlikable, sidelining their voices and perpetuating silence. The model minority myth likability can also tie into stereotypes, such as expecting certain groups to be agreeable or hardworking, while punishing those who don't conform. When likability becomes a hidden standard, it shifts focus away from systemic issues and onto individuals, dismissing inequities as personal failings rather than structural problems. This mindset upholds oppressive systems by making it easier to ignore the root causes of exclusion. What happens when we focus on being liked in a system of oppression? In systems of oppression, the pressure to be liked often means conforming to harmful norms and expectations that were never designed to include or uplift everyone. For those from strategically excluded communities, this pressure can be especially damaging. Here's what it can look like. Self-silencing. Suppressing authentic selves to avoid conflict or rejection. This can mean not speaking up about inequities, not challenging harmful practices, or minimizing parts of one's identity to fit in. Burnout and disconnection. Constantly striving to meet others' expectations of likability can leave individuals feeling drained, frustrated, and disconnected from their own values. Internalized oppression. Over time, the need to be liked can reinforce internalized biases, making individuals believe their worth is tied to how well they conform to oppressive standards. Missed opportunities for change. When we focus on being liked, we may avoid difficult conversations or actions that challenge the status quo, delaying the progress needed to dismantle inequities. When you speak your truth, the impact on likability and retaliation can be significant. There's a cost to speaking your truth in systems that were never designed to include or protect you. For many, especially women of color, neurodivergent individuals, and those at the intersections of multiple strategically excluded identities, speaking up often comes with consequences. When you finally decide to speak your truth, whether it's calling out bias, challenging harmful practices, or simply advocating for equity, you might find that your likability takes a hit. Systems of oppression thrive on silence, and breaking that silence can feel like a threat to those who benefit from the status quo. The likability penalty. Women of color in particular are often labeled as troublemakers or too much when they speak up. Neurodivergent individuals who communicate directly or challenge norms may be seen as difficult or unprofessional. These labels serve to discredit and isolate truth-tellers, reinforcing the very systems they seek to disrupt. Retaliation and pushback. According to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, about half of all discrimination complaints in the U.S. result in retaliation. This can take the form of being excluded from opportunities, demoted, or even fired. The psychological toll is immense, with many experiencing anxiety, burnout, and self-doubt. The weight of advocacy. Speaking up often means carrying the burden of educating others, navigating backlash, and managing the emotional labor of being a truth teller. It's a heavy load that can feel isolating, especially without a strong support system. But here's the paradox. Speaking your truth, even when it's met with resistance, is often what sparks the most meaningful change. It's the act of disrupting oppressive mindsets and creating space for others to thrive. The intersectionality of being neurodivergent. For neurodivergent individuals, the pressure to conform to likability standards often intersects with ableism and systemic oppression. Traits like direct communication, stimming, or needing accommodations are often misunderstood or penalized in environments that prioritize neurotypical norms. This creates additional layers of exclusion and self-silencing for neurodivergent people. Masking and exhaustion. The expectation to mask neurodivergent traits to appear normal can lead to chronic exhaustion, anxiety, and burnout. Masking often involves suppressing natural behaviors or communication styles to avoid judgment or exclusion. Bias in perception. Neurodivergent individuals are frequently mislabeled as difficult, unprofessional, or unlikable due to differences in tone, body language, or processing styles. This bias reinforces systemic inequities and limits opportunities for authentic connection. Unrealistic expectations of executive functions. Many workplaces assume a baseline of executive functioning skills, like time management, organization, and multitasking, that aligns with neurotypical standards. When neurodivergent individuals struggle with these tasks or require accommodations, they are often unfairly perceived as incompetent or lacking effort, rather than being supported with equitable solutions. Intersectional impact. For neurodivergent individuals who also hold other excluded identities, such as being Black, Brown, or LGBTQIA2+, the barriers to being seen and valued multiply. These compounded oppressions can make it even harder to navigate spaces that demand conformity. As Lydia X.Z. Brown, a disability justice advocate, reminds us, neurodivergence is not a flaw to be fixed, but a difference to be honored. When organizations fail to honor these differences, they perpetuate exclusion and diminish the potential for true belonging. How do we create safety for truth tellers? Organizations must take intentional steps to ensure that those who speak up are not penalized for doing so. This requires a commitment to psychological safety and accountability. Analyze engagement data. Regularly survey employees to understand their experiences of bias, inclusion, and psychological safety. Develop a code of conduct. Create clear policies that protect employees from retaliation and hold leaders accountable for fostering equity. Accept failure. Normalize the idea that mistakes are part of growth and create environments where feedback is welcomed rather than punished. Propel and fund ERGs. Support employee resource groups that provide safer spaces for excluded employees to share their experiences and advocate for change. Team tenets on DEI incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion into team values and decision-making processes. How do we move past the need to be liked? Breaking free from the likability trap requires practice and patience. Here are some steps to consider. Reframe your focus. Instead of striving to be liked, ask yourself, am I acting in alignment with my values, even if it makes others uncomfortable? Recognize that this work will have discomfort and that it's important to acknowledge privilege and the status quo. Prioritize accountability over approval. True equity work isn't always comfortable. It's messy, challenging, and sometimes confrontational. Shift your energy toward fostering accountability and meaningful change rather than seeking validation. Build community. Surround yourself with people who value you for who you are, not for how well you conform. Affinity spaces, mentorship, and trusted networks can provide support and affirmation. Practice self-compassion. Let go of perfectionism and the need to meet everyone's expectations. Remind yourself that your worth isn't tied to how others perceive you. Remember, perfectionism is an oppressive mindset. Disrupt oppressive mindsets. Recognize when likability is being used as a tool of oppression, whether in yourself or others, and challenge it. Advocate for systems that value equity, authenticity, and justice over conformity. A disclaimer on privilege and safety. Not everyone has the privilege to show up as their authentic selves, and that's okay. Safety must always come first. For those in strategically excluded groups, masking or adapting to fit into the workplace isn't a failure, it's survival. These suggestions are for those who may have the privilege to take risks in their authenticity. It doesn't make anyone less when safety is at play. Through a human lens, what typically happens when we decide we don't like someone? They're excluded. Their ideas may be dismissed, or they may be left out of key projects. Opportunities shrink. Promotions, mentorship, or informal support can become harder to access. Bias takes root. We justify our dislike with assumptions about their personality, work ethic, or fit. Culture suffers. Teams fracture, trust erodes, and psychological safety disappears. The harm doesn't stop at the individual. Organizations also pay the price: reduced innovation, higher turnover, and a lack of diverse perspectives at decision-making tables. The challenge is to move beyond likability as a measure of someone's value. Instead of asking, "Do I like them?" ask, "Am I treating them with dignity and equity?" Workplaces thrive when we prioritize fairness, respect, and belonging over subjective likability. Let's commit to dismantling systems where likability is used to uphold inequities and instead create environments where everyone has the opportunity to succeed, whether or not they fit a likable mold. What's your take on likability in the workplace? How do you ensure fairness in your decisions? Let's discuss.